The National News Desk, locally covered, nationally connected.
The operation's over, and now we let it settle in. You see the plants are starting to construction already.
Liberation Day sinking in. The price concerns for cars, clothes, medications, even your next cell phone. Why the White House says give it time.
I think that Republicans are heading toward a cliff right now.
Midterm worries. A landslide loss in Wisconsin has Republicans feeling nervous. The Trump policies that some say could lead to a blue wave in 2026.
If you do something like this, you will be prosecuted to the fullest extent of the law, and you're going to jail.
A man enters a guilty plea for trying to kill a Supreme Court justice. Why his case could be used to set a precedent for future cases. From the nation's capital, this is the National News Desk, America's News Now. Thank you for joining us. I'm Dee Dee Gatton, and on this Weekend Edition, we take a look at the big headlines of the week, and we look ahead at what to expect, starting with the 4 big stories we've been following this week. Employment opportunities in the U.S. fall amid economic uncertainty. New York City Mayor Eric Adams' corruption case dismissed, and egg prices come back down to earth as the number of bird flu cases drop. Plus, GOP lawmakers sounding off on how the Trump administration's policies may have an effect on the midterms. But first, stocks on Wall Street plummeted this week following the news of President Trump's massive tariff plans that the White House promises will pay off with more manufacturing jobs. China announcing retaliatory tariffs on American products, major companies caught up in uncertainty, and firms like JP Morgan raising their odds of a recession. National correspondent Atra El-Nashar has the latest on this and why the White House stands by its new trade policy.
On the second day of fallout from President Trump's worldwide tariff plan, a split-screen reaction to global markets in freefall.
And the market sells off again.
NASDAQ 100 set to enter a bear market.
If you wanted to make the market crash, I think you would go with this game plan.
If you ask the Trump administration, all is well.
Markets are crashing because markets are based on the stock value of companies who today are embedded in modes of production that are bad for the United States.
This is a great time to get rich, richer than ever before, President Trump posted on social media. And after Friday morning's jobs report showed 228,000 jobs were created in March, he wrote, "Great jobs numbers, far better than expected. It's already working. Hang tough, we can't lose." But the jobs report was overshadowed by news that China is retaliating against Trump's tariffs with additional 34% tariffs on American products. With more countries expected to hit back, and soon, Federal Reserve Chair Jerome Powell says a couple things are becoming clear.
The tariff increases will be significantly larger than expected. And the same is likely to be true of the economic effects, which will include higher inflation and slower growth.
A recipe for a worst-case scenario, says JP Morgan.
As things stand now, we're headed to recession.
But President Trump, who says my policies will never change, is betting that all the economists are wrong and that his tariffs will correct what he calls major trade imbalances between the U.S. and trading partners, incentivize those trading partners to eliminate tariffs on American products, and push companies to move production here to the U.S. But even Trump says that could take a couple years, if it works. How long will Republicans buy into this strategy?
In the long run, we're all dead. Short run matters too.
The White House distributing these talking points to Republicans on Capitol Hill to promote the Trump tariffs as a gateway to a new golden age. Some in the GOP admit there's no guarantee of a light at the end of this tunnel. On Capitol Hill, I'm Atra El-Nashar for the National News Desk, America's News Now.
Republicans now showing increasing concern surrounding the 2026 midterms. It comes on the heels of a landslide loss in a Wisconsin Supreme Court race. Some more recent worry is creeping up, and that is the possible impact of President Trump's tariffs across the board.
He's used tariffs in the past effectively to get nations to do what they should have done anyway. Right now, I'll give him the benefit of the doubt, but I'm concerned.
I'm all for fair trade, reciprocal tariffs. But I think in the end, a trade war doesn't help anybody.
Some in the GOP worry about a Democratic version of the Tea Party, where anger at former President Obama in 2010 led to a red wave election that saw enormous Democratic losses.
I think that Republicans are heading toward a cliff right now. I think the likely recession combined with drastically increased prices on gasoline, groceries, rent.
In my state of Alabama, we voted almost unanimously for President Trump. They believe in him, and he's trying something different. We have to have a different game plan.
The White House and the GOP believe there's no reason to be concerned that recent losses were results of weak candidates. The Washington Post reported that members of Trump's National Security Council, including White House National Security Advisor Mike Waltz, used his personal Gmail account to conduct government business. The report said a senior Waltz aide also used Gmail communication about an ongoing conflict, including details of military positions and powerful weapon systems. Experts say using Gmail is a less secure method than using Signal, an encrypted messaging platform. Employment opportunities in the U.S. are now falling. The number of job openings fell to 7.57 million in February. At the beginning of the year, the number of available jobs was 7.76 million. U.S. employers likely cut back on their hiring plans in February, due in part to heightened economic uncertainty. New developments: a California man will plead guilty to attempting to kill Supreme Court Justice Brett Kavanaugh. The man admitted to showing up to Kavanaugh's home in 2022 with the intention to kill him. Judiciary leaders sounding the alarm in recent years about threats against judges. The National News Desk, Jeff Harris, explains if this case could set the tone for how others will be handled.
I'm told by legal experts it certainly has the potential to be. With more threats being made against judges, the Justice Department could impose the harshest penalty, sending a message that this type of behavior comes with severe consequences.
Angelo, a legal expert, tells us in a letter to the judge overseeing this case, lawyers for Nicholas Roski wrote he will plead guilty to attempting to assassinate Kavanaugh.
He's going to enter a plea of guilty, and the next step will be sentencing.
Roski faces up to life in prison, admitting that he flew from California to D.C., traveling to Kavanaugh's home in Maryland with the intention of killing him. Authorities finding weapons at the scene.
There are sentencing guidelines based on the severity of the offense and the person's prior criminal record, but it really leaves a large amount of range for a judge to decide what to sentence someone to.
In this case, Petrick believes sentencing could get contentious, partly because of recent threats made against Supreme Court justices, most recently Justice Amy Coney Barrett last month.
A family member of hers was threatened explicitly with a bomb mailed, which turned out to be a hoax.
Pam C., also a legal expert, agrees with Petrick, adding she thinks this case will ultimately set a precedent for threats made against judges.
If you do something like this, you will be prosecuted to the fullest extent of the law, and you're going to jail.
Because she believes if a justice or judge does not feel safe doing their job, it has a chilling effect on the justice system itself.
Whatever their decision might be, they're following the law, that they are going to be safe in their own lives.
Now, after arriving at Kavanaugh's home, Roski abandoned his plans, with transcripts showing that he spoke with 911. Court documents also show Roski said that he was suicidal. His attorneys have asked all parties involved to meet sometime next week. I'm Jeff Harris reporting from Washington.
Attorney General Pam Bondi directs the Department of Justice to dismiss a lawsuit challenging a Georgia election law. The legislation was passed following President Donald Trump's 2020 election loss. It added a voter ID requirement for mail ballots and shortened the time period to request a mail-in ballot, among other provisions. The Biden administration argued the measure was aimed at suppressing black voters. Bondi refutes that claim. The corruption case against New York City Mayor Eric Adams is now dismissed. In a split with the Trump Justice Department, the judge ordered that the bribery charges cannot be brought again. In his decision, the judge wrote, allowing charges to be refiled would create the perception that the mayor's freedom depends on his ability to carry out the Trump administration's immigration enforcement priorities. He wrote, his decision means the charges cannot be used as leverage over Adams or the city.
I also want to apologize to New Yorkers for having to go through this with me, a baseless case that should have never been brought in the first place. The lies spread through false leaks and splashed across sensational headlines and all of the distractions.
And the DOJ's effort to drop the case and retain the ability to restore charges resulted in the mass resignation of several Justice Department officials. Wholesale egg prices dropped to $3 per dozen. That's a 9% decline from last week. The American Farm Bureau says lower costs come from noticeably fewer bird flu cases, but egg prices remain historically high. The Consumer Price Index reports eggs are nearly 59% more expensive than they were this time last year. President Trump continues to push for a ceasefire between Russia and Ukraine as the deadly conflict drags on into its third year. Emma Withrow from the Fact Check team joining us now to discuss. So I know recently of a U.S.-backed partial ceasefire, and it sounds like there is still work to be done.
Yeah, there really is. So the U.S. helped broker a ceasefire between Ukraine and Russia last week that focused on making navigation in the Black Sea for shipments safer and also stopping long-range strikes on energy sites. But of course, things are pretty messy. Both sides are already disagreeing on when it starts and what exactly is covered in this. And Russia's demanding the U.S. lift sanctions first. And Ukraine's not sure how much this actually helps them. That's all according to reporting from AP.
Yeah, so much obviously back and forth. A lot of complaints, though, on both sides, really, about the ceasefire in its current form, timing being one of them.
Yeah, timing is the big part. So the main disagreement here, really, in this one is over the timing and the scope of the ceasefire. Russia says it started in March, while Ukraine denies that. Plus, both sides are accusing each other of violating the terms already, which makes the whole thing even more complicated. So there's a lot of work to do.
All right, Emma, thank you. A little later on, Emma will be back to break down even further the human and the financial cost of the Russia-Ukraine war. Coming up, migrant crime crackdown. The Trump administration sends a major signal to the notorious MS-13 gang after it arrests one of its alleged leaders. And assisting with out-of-state care. The ruling in one state on doctors who help patients who are traveling to other states for abortions. This week, the Trump administration claimed a major victory after one of the alleged top 3 leaders of the violent MS-13 gang was taken into custody. Joining Jan Jeffcoat to discuss is former superintendent of the Chicago PD and former FBI special agent Jody Weiss.
His arrest was the result, as we know, of a months-long investigation, part of the administration's campaign to eliminate transnational gangs and remove these criminal illegal aliens. But Jody, this also highlights the importance of MS-13 being designated as a foreign terrorist organization. So talk about the benefits of that and how that helped these joint task forces arrest him.
You know, Jan, I love the fact that President Trump designated these gangs as foreign terrorist organizations. Now, in this particular case, that designation probably didn't make a big difference because this case was well down the tracks when the administration took over. But there's 3 reasons why I really like this designation. Number 1, it gives much broader options for both the investigators and the prosecutors. Talk about surveillance. Now they can use the Patriot Act, they can use FISA, and then they have the ability to charge individuals with material support who are giving money to these groups. Talk about going up on a wire to try to identify the group, look at the relationships. It is much easier to use a FISA than it is to use the traditional Title III in the criminal world. The threshold is much lower, and the scope is much broader of what the order can actually do. Then you can look at the penalties, up to life imprisonment without parole. Number 2, the additional resources. Do you know there's 200 FBI Joint Terrorism Task Forces in the United States? Now they can be brought to bear against these gangs. You've got federal, state, local resources work together, and you can also use the military as well as intel resources to track these leaders across any border in the world. And that brings up the 3rd reason why I'm really excited about that, the international cooperation. The United States can now pressure these countries to bring additional resources to bear, much as they would have with Al-Qaeda or ISIS. So Is it going to take the FBI a little while to transition to the use of these terrorism statutes to go after gangs? Yes, but when they do, huge shot in the arm for America's battle against these gangs. I only wish I would have had this option when I was still in the Bureau.
Right. It would have been going after these gangs and doing these gang investigations a lot easier for you, I'm sure, right? This
Yes.
is definitely a new approach for the FBI. We know that Director Patel has stated he wants to go after these violent gangs. He wants to go after violent crime. You say he's got a blueprint for this from the 1990s. How so?
Yeah, if you want to go after violent crime, I would tell the director, bring back the fugitive task forces. Back in 1990, Attorney General Reno tasked us, because I was actually at headquarters, to come up with a plan to allow FBI agents to work with state and local officers to attack this huge uptick in violent crime based upon the crack cocaine epidemic. So we had to find a way to give the jurisdiction and the authority for agents to work with cops going after traditional local crimes. So what we did, we took a very aggressive view of the Attorney General guidelines and came up with the authority to allow agents to work in a task force environment with police officers to locate, arrest, and capture the worst of the worst fugitives. Huge benefit in taking a lot of bad guys off the street. And the secondary benefit was that it really fostered a relationship of collaboration and trust between state, local, and federal authorities. So it was a huge move back then, and it had an immediate impact. The one challenge that Cash is going to have to do, he's going to have to work with the Attorney General and change the guidelines right now, because currently the FBI is pretty restrictive to work with local officers on the street, but that's easy to do. And if they do that, I think it can have an immediate impact. Yeah. It worked in the past, it can work today.
Hopefully we'll start seeing more federal and local law enforcement start to work together, which we have not seen. We did not see that very much during the previous administration. Jody Weiss, always great to see you, sir. Have a great weekend.
You too. Thanks, Jan.
A federal judge ruled Alabama can't prosecute doctors and organizations that help patients travel to other states for abortions. The idea of potentially charging doctors with criminal conspiracy for assisting with out-of-state care was brought up in 2022 by Alabama Attorney General Steve Marshall. U.S. District Judge Myron Thompson says the law would be equivalent to prosecuting people in Alabama for gambling in Las Vegas, since it's outlawed in the state. The judge ruled that the prosecutions would violate the First Amendment and the right to travel. Alabama bans abortion at any stage of pregnancy with no exceptions. And after 2.5 years, Hyundai Motor Group has finally opened its $7.6 billion electric vehicle factory near Savannah, Georgia. This facility is set to produce 500,000 electric and hybrid vehicles annually and create 14,000 full-time jobs by 2028. Hyundai's U.S.-made vehicles will not be affected by Trump's 25% tariff on auto imports starting on April 2nd. Coming up next, a 7-week hospital stay from strep. One teen's severe reaction that stunned doctors. Then pickleball problems, how one neighborhood courts are becoming a nuisance. You're watching the National News Desk, America's News Now. The National News Desk team of reporters is bringing you the headlines from coast to coast. We're taking the pulse of America, and we start in Ohio, where 2 common infections have left a teen fighting for her life.
Just last month, 17-year-old Josie Tackett documented her day with her new horse.
It just really hits home how fragile life is.
Now she's at Nationwide Children's Hospital dealing with complications from flu A and strep A.
And something about that combination and her body just went crazy, but the doctors can't explain it. Like, why She didn't show any symptoms. Why did she get so sick so fast?
Her mom, Renee, says life changed in a blink with no warning. She tells me Josie now has brain injuries and they're preparing for her to be in a wheelchair in the future. Renee feels it's now her mission to ask you if you're eligible to donate blood or platelets. She says it only takes a bit of your time.
The U.S. Department of Agriculture recently announcing more than $8 million in federal funding cuts, leaving food banks across the nation, including here in Nevada, to pick up the pieces.
We are looking at a little over 3 million pounds of reduction in our next year's funding stream in food resources.
The Food Bank of Northern Nevada relies on funding from the Local Food Purchase Assistance Cooperative Agreement Program. That's a program allowing the Nevada Department of Agriculture to use USDA funding to source fresh food. The Food Bank also relies on supplies from the Emergency Food Assistance Program. Both of these programs have had their funding impacted. Jocelyn Lantrip is the Director of Marketing for the Food Bank of Northern Nevada.
Currently, we had about 350,000 pounds that was on order to be delivered from April through August, and that funding has been paused, and that was a load, several loads of meat, dairy, and eggs. And so we are not receiving that food.
Food from the bank goes towards improving food insecurity across the state, as they serve around 160,000 Northern Nevadans each month.
Indoors or out, players admit pickleball is noisy. People who live near outdoor pickleball courts tell us the noise of paddles hitting plastic balls for hours on end can be maddening. A woman who lives by the Kittery courts, who works nights at a hospital, says she can't sleep during the day when they're playing.
She does have a point. It's a loud game. No question about it.
Pickleball director Jim White says the outdoor pickleball courts were built on a basketball court, which made the project more affordable. But the courts are steps away from at least 5 homes.
Should the courts be moved? No. It would be too expensive. The players have, on their own, have taken it to start later in the morning to give her an opportunity to sleep.
This week, the town manager told councilors they're still waiting for recommendations from sound engineers on how to best reduce the racket.
We have contracted with a sound engineer to evaluate the pickleball noise at Emeryfield Park and to develop a concrete set of recommendations and engineered solutions.
Coming up next, drivers for DoorDash and Uber work to shape economic policy, why the no tax on tips movement could leave them in limbo. Taking a look at the top trending stories on our website right now, 2 baby eagles that recently hatched in California now have names after a group of school children helped narrow down suggestions from the public Meet Sunny and Gizmo. Love those names. 7 tigers. They were seized from a private residence in Las Vegas on Wednesday morning, leading to the arrest of their owner amid concerns about the animals' welfare. The tigers are being relocated to an out-of-state sanctuary while the investigation continues. And Val Kilmer, known for playing Iceman in Top Gun, Batman in Batman Forever, and Jim Morrison in The Doors, has died. He was 65. Kilmer died from pneumonia after recovering from throat cancer in 2014. Those stories and much more available right now at thenationaldesk.com. WNBA star Caitlin Clark broke a new record in women's sports card sales. Last weekend, Clark's 2024 Panini Prism WNBA Gold Vinyl rookie card sold at an auction for $366,000. It is now considered the most valuable women's sports card of all time. The last record was held by tennis pro Serena Williams, whose card went for over $266,000 in 2022. If you're looking for a meal in a hurry, new research shows the lines at Chick-fil-A move the fastest, and it consistently gets more orders right with a 92% accuracy rate since 2019. InTouch Insight data shows Burger King and McDonald's are next with 88%. KFC has struggled at 81%. How does Chick-fil-A keep the top spot? Well, the chain says it sends drone-equipped analytics squads to assess each restaurant. DoorDash and Uber drivers are now calling on Republican lawmakers to be included in the Trump administration's no tax on tips pledge. Senator Ted Cruz's policy would make most restaurant and casino workers eligible. Most rideshare drivers are independent contractors, not employees, disqualifying them from receiving benefits. The director of the Economic Policy Institute says tax-free tips could prevent rising wages. Coming up, an investigation into the Signal controversy, the top official under scrutiny. You're watching the National News Desk, America's News Now. Catch us live weekdays from 6 a.m. to 11 a.m. and 10 p.m. to midnight Eastern Time, and anytime online at thenationaldesk.com. We'll be right back.
The National News Desk, locally covered, nationally connected.
The optics of vehicles like these, it's a deterrent factor.
New records being set at the southern border, and the 2 words we've not heard before to describe the situation: plus.
We have 3 powers in our Constitution, and they all seem to be butting heads.
Republicans in Congress considering action against federal judges after parts of Trump's agenda are stalled. Later, vaccine uncertainty, how a rare uptick in measles cases could impact those who are already vaccinated. From the nation's capital, this is the National News Desk, America's News Now. Thank you for joining us. I'm Dee Dee Gatton. As we come back on, U.S. Customs and Border Protection says the month of March recorded the lowest numbers of crossings at the southwest border in history. It is a stunning 180-degree shift from the situation just months ago. But as the White House celebrates, there are rising concerns about the methods being used. Here's Christine Frizzell.
A new reality at the southern border, captured in the headlines of border cities and towns. The Los Angeles Times this week reporting the California-Mexico border, once overwhelmed, now nearly empty. The Texas Tribune reporting the same about migrant shelters. And U.S. Customs and Border Protection is now using two words to describe the situation few thought possible: operational control.
Operational control is what we're trying to achieve. We're trying to detect anyone and everything coming across the border illegally and to have 100% situational awareness of what's going on in our area of responsibility.
The month of March 3 years ago saw more than 222,000 southwest border encounters, followed by numbers hovering just below 200,000. Until March of 2025, with just a little more than 7,000 illegal crossings recorded. The U.S. military assisting with the effort.
So that's part of the show of force here in El Paso sector. So the visual, the optics of vehicles like these, it's a deterrent factor.
Inside the country, ICE continues to post photos of undocumented immigrants they've arrested and insist are criminals. The total surpassing 113,000, with 100,000 deported, according to the New York Post. But some are sounding alarm bells following 3 school-age students being detained by ICE at this New York dairy and sent to Texas. And a growing list of people taken to the El Salvador prison turning out not to be criminals, including a gay hairdresser from Florida and a father from Maryland, which the White House called a clerical error.
Nobody had a hearing. There was no due process at all. That's why due process are the two most beautiful words in the English language, because they prevent these kinds of Kafkaesque nightmares from happening.
As these incidents continue to pile up, questions about the legality of the methods remain tied up in court. I'm Christine Frizzell for the National News Desk.
The acting inspector general of the Defense Department will investigate Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth's use of Signal while discussing last month's military strikes in Yemen. The acting inspector general said in a letter to Hegseth, the goal is to determine if Hegseth and others complied with protocol and classification requirements while using the app. Top officials previously said the information in those messages wasn't classified. Truce talks in the Russia-Ukraine war appear to be on pause. However, President Trump says he believes the U.S. is making progress on a peace deal, while Germany's foreign minister described the U.S. effort to secure a truce as deadlocked during a visit to Ukraine. China's foreign minister says the talks are encouraging. And a U.S. volcano likely to erupt. That's according to scientists at the Alaska Volcano Observatory. The U.S. Geological Survey reported hundreds of small tremors near Mount Spur. A 3.7 magnitude quake hit about 65 miles below the surface. That is a sign that magma could be rising from the Earth's mantle. Scientists estimate an eruption could happen in the next few weeks to months. As we look ahead, the 2025 Atlantic hurricane season starts in June, and forecasters are now getting ready for a busy year. Hurricane researchers at Colorado State University have released their early outlook, and the group suggests, as you look here, an above-average hurricane season with 17 named storms. 9 are expected to become hurricanes. 4 will likely be major hurricanes. This year's Atlantic hurricane season will peak in August and end in November. The president and Republicans in Congress want to rein in the power of the judicial branch. Court rulings have been one of the only checks on President Trump's power, angering supporters that his agenda is being slowed down. The National News Desk, Matt Galka, reports on the push for judicial reform.
Congressional Republicans, angry with how courts are slowing down President Trump's agenda, hope to limit the power rulings have over the executive branch. Rulings affecting the entire nation have been debated for years and have been a worry for Supreme Court justices. Justice Elena Kagan voiced her concerns about judicial power 3 years ago.
She stated, in the Trump years, people used to go to the Northern District of California, and in the Biden years, they go to Texas.
Just can't be right that one district judge can stop a nationwide policy in its tracks.
There have been 159 cases brought against the Trump administration through March. More than 40 have resulted in temporary restraining orders or injunctions against some of the president's executive actions, including mass firings of federal workers, dismantling federal agencies, and using certain powers to deport alleged gang members. Republicans are quick to point out the disparity compared to Joe Biden, who had 14 injunctions impacting his actions during his term. Democrats say it's because the current president is running over the Constitution.
If the number of decisions striking down Trump illegality is unprecedented today, it's only because the sheer number of illegal acts committed in the first 100 days is unprecedented.
Critics of whichever party occupies the White House have seemingly gotten better at court farming and finding districts where rulings will go in their favor. The phenomena has gotten increasingly popular, with 6 injunctions going against George W. Bush and 12 against Barack Obama during their times in office, before hitting 64 during Trump's first term.
Right now, we have 3 powers in our Constitution, and they all seem to be butting heads. It looks like now Congress is now going to be butting heads with the judiciary branch, trying to clip the wings of their power. Congress has the power to do that.
The House is likely to pass a bill this week that would limit the scope of injunctions to just the parties that sue, rather than the whole country. Its passage in the Senate is a long shot, along with other pushes to impeach judges based on disagreements with rulings. The Supreme Court could ultimately end up ruling on it later this year. Reporting in Washington, I'm Matt Gelka for the National News Desk, America's News Now.
The second murder trial for Karen Reed has begun with jury selection. Reed is accused of hitting her police officer boyfriend John O'Keefe with her SUV while driving drunk, then leaving him to die in the snow outside a friend's Massachusetts home in 2022. She is charged with murder and manslaughter under the influence of alcohol. Her defense team claims Reed is the victim of a cover-up. Reed's first trial last year ended in a mistrial. New details: cigarettes led to South Carolina's Table Rock fire, which is now spread to nearly 14,000 acres. That's according to the Forestry Commission. 3 men and a juvenile have been charged. Arrest warrants say the suspects were smoking on a hiking trail at the state park and did not properly extinguish their cigarettes. 3 teens, 18 or 19 years old, were arrested and charged with 1 count each of negligently allowing fire to spread to lands or property of another. The juvenile was charged with the same offense. Microsoft is reportedly stopping or delaying data centers across the globe. The tech giant has pulled back on facilities in Indonesia, Australia, and the UK and U.S. plants, according to Bloomberg. This is a possible signal of a reassessment of Microsoft's artificial intelligence aims. This also comes shortly after Chinese AI DeepSeek disrupted the industry with a model requiring a fraction of the computation of OpenAI at a minimal cost. Former Vice President Mike Pence is this year's recipient of the John F. Kennedy Profile in Courage Award. The foundation is recognizing Pence for certifying the 2020 election in the immediate aftermath of the attack on the U.S. Capitol. Despite President Trump coercing him to not certify the results, Pence upheld his oath to the Constitution. Peace negotiations and ceasefire talks between Russia and Ukraine continue to fall. This is now the largest and the deadliest conflict in Europe since World War II. Emma Withrow joining us now from the Fact Check team. So let's start with the casualties. The latest number I saw was over 100,000 deaths in Russia alone. Is that still the case?
Yeah, calculating the totals is really difficult here because both sides usually report less deaths to try to not weaken their stance in the conflict, which makes sense. It's been done for years and years. But according to Ukraine's reported losses, over 70,000 Ukrainian soldiers have been killed on the battlefield. And then as for Russia, we're using numbers from BBC. They say around 100,000 Russian soldiers have been killed. And as for civilians, the UN reports over 12,650 civilians have been killed in Ukraine since the start of the war.
And also on top of that, the cost of the war is staggering.
Astronomical. Yeah, the U.S. has spent billions on this. According to the Council on Foreign Relations, since the start of the war, Congress has passed 5 major bills aiding Ukraine, which together calculate around $175 billion in spending. And then in December of 2024, the U.S. gave Ukraine another $20 billion loan, which is supposed to be paid back with interest from Russian assets that have been frozen. So we're going to have to wait and see on that.
Right. Emma, thank you. And if you want a closer look at all those numbers that Emma just mentioned, including links to sources, just scan that QR code on your screen or visit thenationaldesk.com. So to come, our team's correspondent breaks down this week in Washington, from global reaction to President Trump's widespread tariff initiative to lawmakers working to hold those that defrauded the government during the pandemic accountable.
Welcome back. Our Washington Bureau covers the nation's capital every day, and our team of correspondents reports on the important issues facing the country and how they impact you. President Trump announcing widespread tariffs on dozens of countries, calling the move economic liberation and, quote, one of the most important days in American history. National correspondent Audra Elnishar, you've been covering the tariff story for weeks. What's the reaction been from Congress and around the globe?
Well, look, these tariffs are massive, and that's by design. The administration wants to restructure the global economy, and that's a big gamble. So as far as reaction, let's start here in Washington. The president's most loyal allies are sticking by him. They're arguing that he is putting America first, that this will lead to a new golden age of American manufacturing, despite what they say will be short-term pain to get there. Now, economists, many executives, some of the biggest investment banks in the world warn that that's not what's going to happen. They say that the odds of recession are higher because of these tariffs, that Americans will see higher prices when they're already struggling with years of inflation since after the pandemic, and that this will cause disaster, and we'll see some fallout of what seems to be coming what seems to be playing into some isolationist policies of this administration. As far as reaction from America's trading partners, we are starting to see retaliatory measures being prepared from the European Union, from Canada, from China, just to name a few. Because remember, these tariffs rolled out by the administration are going to impact just about every country on Earth. But let's talk about how it's going to impact folks watching right now. The products that are on the shelves right now when you go to the grocery store today or the gas station, those should be fine. You know, those prices are going to be what they would have been anyway. But going into next week, the week after, those plausibly could be more expensive than they would have been had these tariffs not been put in place, if they are coming from a country other than the United States, or if parts to make it are coming from places other than the United States. According to the Commerce Department, about half of what Americans buy come from places other than the United States. They're imports. So this could be a painful period for the American consumer. The president is saying as much. He says there's going to be some disturbance. He's not saying how bad it will be, how long it will last, but he says it's worth it. It's a big gamble.
Right, so those ripple effects we'll be watching very, very closely, and to see how long those ripple effects last. Meanwhile, as President Trump and Elon Musk's DOGE effort to reduce the size of the federal government continues, national correspondent Christine Frizzell, you spoke to a watchdog who says there's one department that should get more of their attention.
Yeah, the biggest department that we have, and of course, that's the Department of Defense. This is really interesting, Steve. You know, here in Washington, we hear the stories every day. Thousands of workers who have been fired, entire agencies dismantled. You go on the website, though, for DOGE, their wall of receipts shows that of the estimated $140 billion that at least DOGE says it's saved, the top 10 agencies for cuts actually don't include the one that spends the most money, the Department of Defense. We see DOD continuing to make things like the F-35 fighter jet. That has a $2 trillion price tag, despite being used less and less by the military. There's also another interesting trend. Far more admirals and generals serving as top brass, even though the number of those on the front line has really diminished. I spoke to Government Accountability Institute President Peter Schweitzer about this.
The reality is today we have basically 10% of the fighting men and women that we had in World War II, but we actually have more four-star generals and admirals now than we did during the Second World War.
So again, you know, the government agencies with the largest cuts have actually been those that have some of the smallest budgets, despite the vast majority of this country's fiscal obligations being with the Department of Defense, which, by the way, recently failed its 7th audit in a row. Also in January, President Trump fired the DoD Inspector General. One of that person's job is to sort of oversee and make sure money isn't being wasted. There are rising concerns from a lot of government watchdogs, Steve, that you know, they continue to operate as if the rules don't apply to them.
Yeah, and speaking of federal dollars, this past week, some lawmakers looking to give federal prosecutors more time to go after people accused of bilking the federal government during the pandemic. National correspondent Matt Galka, tell us more about that.
Yeah, I mean, this is basically the hunt for COVID fraudulent dollars that were dispersed at the height of the pandemic. This is basically the hunt continuing. To put it in perspective, and we're not talking about small sums of money here, right? The Small Business Administration estimates about $200 billion through various programs that were designed to help people get through the pandemic, whether it was helping small businesses, employees who lost their jobs. About $200 billion were given out to fraudsters, and that again is no small sum of money. Some of the statute of limitations to try and continue hunting down some of these fraudsters, hold people accountable, get some of this money back. That is set to come up soon on some of the programs. So now some members of Congress, Senator Joni Ernst from Iowa being one, she wants to extend the statute of limitations on some of these programs to 10 years so that the government and some watchdogs can continue trying to hold people accountable and maybe get some of this money back. So she introduced that bill and it has a companion bill in the House. And there's also another element to this. There is a committee that was set up to kind of be a oversight committee for some of the programs and dollars that were doled out. That committee is set to sunset at the end of the year, and they are asking Congress to make that committee permanent also to continue their work. So if we want to continue to try and get some of this money back, if we want to grab some of these criminals and hold them accountable, some of this stuff is going to have to be approved by Congress to again have this hunt for this fraudulent money to let it continue.
Matt, Christine, Audra, incisive reporting as always. Thank you very much for your hard work every day. Back to you.
Engineers at Northwestern University have developed what they believe is the world's smallest pacemaker. This device is designed for patients who temporarily need a pacemaker, smaller than a grain of rice. Look at it right here. It can fit into a syringe to be injected into the body. It could be especially helpful in fragile hearts of newborns with congenital heart defects. The device dissolves naturally after it's no longer needed. The CDC is confirming there are more than 600 cases of the measles now in more than 20 states. Of those, 97% have been in those who are unvaccinated. That 3% left are called breakthrough cases, where people who are vaccinated still get the measles and pass it to others. One study finds a person not vaccinated is 35 times more likely to get the measles.
Measles virus not only is very contagious, the most contagious respiratory virus.
One dose of vaccine prevents about 95% of the cases, and 2 doses of the vaccine is 97 to 98% of the cases are prevented.
Vaccinated person may get the virus is due to a vaccine failure where your body doesn't respond to the shot, or a secondary vaccine failure where a vaccine weakens over time. Coming up, fake diamonds are being sent to unsuspecting people. The scam now spreading to more cities. This is the National News Desk, America's News Now. We have reporters all across the country in your neighborhoods covering issues that matter to you. And we start in Texas with a push to stop people from certain countries from buying land.
We will not go quietly into the darkness.
Last session, Houston Democrat Gene Wu led the push against a bill that would have effectively banned businesses and people from countries like China from owning Texas land, citing discrimination. But this go-around, Republicans appear more united around House Bill 17, a priority bill for Speaker Dustin Burrows. At least some 6 Republicans have indicated support for the legislation, which would ban individuals from China, Russia, Iran, and North Korea from owning land in Texas. It carves out an exception for green card holders and U.S. citizens, even if they're from those countries. But Democrats say the bill infringes on the fundamentals of the American dream.
A bill to reinstate truancy laws in Oregon under discussion in Salem. Truancy fines are penalties for parents of chronically absent students. Before a fine can be issued, the student and parents would need to speak with school district officials and community members, such as a juvenile court judge, to find solutions for the student. A fine can be excused if the district is happy with the results of the meetings.
It's really having a conversation about understanding what the struggles the family is currently undergoing and why we're having such a hard time getting the student to school.
The bill does not require a superintendent to issue a fine, but does make it an option. Oregon removed all state truancy laws in 2021. Prior to then, parents could be fined $500 for excessive unexcused absences.
It can take all forms. It can be any number of things. Just throw it away. Don't engage. It's really the best practice.
Scammers are finding newer, sneakier ways to get sensitive information. One of the latest tactics, they've been sending packages with items like a phony diamond ring to people. The mail may include false warranty cards with a QR code. A Reading resident tells us she got one of these packages recently, thankfully avoiding scanning the code.
It may be that they are trying to confirm your information, which may be associated, for example, with identity theft. It may also be that they are hoping to collect that information to then pose as you elsewhere.
Still ahead here, Disney announces the return of a summertime favorite for the first time since the pandemic. Plus, the 2 North American countries picked to host the World's Game in 2031. For the first time since the COVID-19 pandemic began, Disney World will have both of its water parks open this summer. Disney's Typhoon Lagoon Water Park in Lake Buena Vista will open on May 1st and will remain open for the rest of its scheduled season. Blizzard Beach in Bay Lake will be open May 21st through September 7th. Guests staying at Disney Resorts hotels can visit the water parks for free on their check-in dates. Some inspiration as you plan your summer vacation there. Over in the soccer world, FIFA has confirmed that the U.S. and potentially Mexico will host the Women's World Cup in 2031. This will be the third time the U.S. has hosted a Women's World Cup. The last one was in 2003, and this will be Mexico's first time hosting if chosen. That'll be all for us on the weekend edition of the National News Desk, America's News Now. Don't forget, you can catch us live from 6 a.m. to 11 a.m. and 10 p.m. to midnight Eastern Time. Check your local listings, and you can also watch us online and catch up with the latest headlines on thenationaldesk.com. Thanks for watching the weekend edition of the National News Desk. I'm Dee Dee Gatton, and from all of us here, have a great week.